Good afternoon and welcome to the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC's May webinar, Recreation's Role in Ensuring Tourism is a Force for Good. My name is Ryan Stewart. I'm your facilitator. Thanks for being here. I'm just going to share my screen and we can get started. All right. I'm speaking to you from the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island, and I'd like to start by acknowledging that I am grateful to live, work, and play on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. A little housekeeping before we get started. Today's webinar is part of a monthly series hosted by the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. The ORCBC is the only unified voice of the outdoor recreation community in the province, representing more than 100 nonprofit organizations. They range from mountain biking and bird watching to hunting and fishing, rock climbing, off-road vehicle users, and many more. All are nonprofit and largely volunteer run. Cumulatively, they represent the council represents more than 100,000 British Columbians. So today's webinar will start with a brief introduction from me. Then we'll have the presentations from our three panelists, followed by a Q&A session. We'll wrap things up at around 2 p.m. Pacific time. If you have any questions for our panelists, please put them in the Q&A area or in the chat. Someone may answer them directly. Otherwise, I'll do my best to pose them to our panelists during the Q&A session. I'm going to apologize now if I don't get to them all. I do my best, but sometimes we run out of time. We're recording today's webinar, and in the next few days, we'll share a recording along with the key takeaways, links, slides, and other resources. Right after we end the webinar, a super short survey will pop up in your web browser. Please stick around and take a moment to fill it out. It helps us do a better job and cover topics that you want to see. All right, so today's topic. How can the outdoor recreation ensure tourism is a force for good? Let's start with how these two are linked. Outdoor recreation is a major contributor to BC's $15 billion tourism industry. So guided adventure travel alone generates $2 billion of income in BC every year. And that doesn't include the many more people that travel the province on their own to fish, hunt, mountain bike, ski, climb, hike, ATV, and more. And so tourism relies on the hard work of the recreation groups that steward the streams, maintain the trails, build the nesting boxes, and advocate for wild places. For a long time, the tourism and outdoor recreation have operated in their own silos for the most part. But we're really seeing that beginning to change. And there's a shift from just marketing to destination to guiding the behavior of visitors so their presence becomes a force for good. So here's a little diagram that I found that sort of shows that this idea of what we call regenerative tourism. And so it's the evolution of green, eco-sustainable tourism. It's the idea is to have tourism become a driver of positive feedback loop that improves all of the parts of the system. So visitors leave a destination more sustainable and resilient and a nicer place to live and visit. I'm going to leave it to our guests to go into more details about this. And I will introduce them now. So we have Erica Hummel, who's the Director of Destination Director of Destination Development and Stewardship at Destination BC, which is the provincial tourism management organization. I think Destination BC's purpose sums up regenerative tourism nicely. It is to improve the quality of life for all people living in British Columbia and visitors through tourism and share the transformative power of BC's experiences with the world in a socially, culturally, environmentally, and economically sustainable way. Our second guest is Yika Gyorky. I hope I pronounced that right, and I apologize if I didn't. And she's the Executive Director of Tourism Fernie. The DMO has a couple regenerative-oriented initiatives, including AmbassadorWild, a project that educates and stewards visitor behavior. And Melanie Riegelsworth is the Executive Director of the Fernie Trails Alliance, which manages the summer and winter trail recreation in the Fernie area. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I am going to hand over to Erica from Destination BC and let her sort of do the first presentation. So Erica, can you tell us a little bit more about Destination BC, how Destination BC is adjusting its work towards more regenerative focus?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Welcome everybody and my colleagues on the panel. Again, my name is Erica Hummel. I'm Director of Destination Development and Stewardship with Destination BC. I've been in the role just over a year now, so relatively new to the provincial level. In previous roles, I worked more on the community level in Northern BC and Prince George, and really pleased to be here and talk to you about some of the things that we're doing at Destination BC. I do work remotely. I'm not in Vancouver, the head office. I work on my home in the Shuswap on the unceded territory of the Secwepemc people. I'm very grateful to be able to work here and definitely play here in this beautiful area of British Columbia. Having said that, I do respectfully acknowledge that the work that Destination BC carries out across all the territories of Indigenous peoples throughout BC, and we honor our ongoing and developing relationships with First Nations, status, non-status, Inuit people, Métis people. We are on a path of learning and we are committed to working together. So thank you again for inviting Destination BC to this very important conversation. Recreation's role in ensuring tourism is a force for good. I've been thinking about that a lot lately as preparing for this, and I do believe that tourism can be a force for good, but this never really happens on its own. We know that if we are to ensure that tourism proves to be a force for good, that it requires a lot of consideration, collaborative pre-planning, concentrated efforts by many partners, many on the call, working together, and strategic investments afforded along the way. There's no question when you think about the supernatural British Columbia brand and all of our promotional and marketing efforts, that Destination BC does an amazing job of showcasing recreational experiences offered in beautiful natural environments across the province. There is no question that BC has what the global traveler is seeking. I think everyone on this call knows that BC will continue to see increased international demand for the foreseeable future. So the real question remaining is how exactly are we going to manage that growing demand on the ground, particularly in the natural spaces that have ecological and cultural significance and must be carefully managed for future generations of British Columbians. I'm going to switch my slide. The answer to this difficult question really lies in best practice of destination management. Destination management is done at the local level. It requires a collective, clear vision of the future state of the community or place. It requires long-term partnerships, dedicated resources, and a new set of metrics for how we collectively measure success. Destination BC's aspiration, as mentioned, is to grow sustainable social, cultural, environmental, and economic benefits for all people in British Columbia by sharing the transformative power of BC's nature and experiences with the world. So when done right, all the potential social, cultural, environmental, and economic impacts brought on by tourism, both the positive and the negative, must be carefully uncovered and considered in advance of by all those who may be affected. The process resolves conflicts among various stakeholder groups and builds relationships and champions within the local community. The planning process engages diverse partners in the development of a long-term plan to manage tourism in alignment with the needs and values of the host community. When done right, the question becomes not what your community can do for tourism, but what tourism can actually do to better serve your community's needs in the long term. Through a planning process that include engaging with diverse stakeholders, destination development strategies have been developed at the sub-regional level across the province. And you can see the covers of them on the screen. These destination development strategies are critical for fostering collaboration among tourism partners, volunteer groups, municipalities, and businesses, and ultimately benefiting the host communities and their residents. Building on the foundation laid within these plans, Destination BC is currently focusing on what we're calling the Invest in Iconics strategy, which takes an integrated approach to marketing and destination management over the long term to encourage visitors to explore more places and more time at more times of year. I'll be happy to take questions about this program, maybe in the Q&A if you'd like to learn more. I just wanted to just very quickly highlight a couple of areas that I was thinking come up as themes when we bring tourism and recreation together. Obviously, there's trails and there's lots of need for trail development, but there's also things beyond the actual trail, the infrastructure to support visitors, the importance of supporting amenities like parking and washrooms, garbage and signage. These are all things that come into those plans that are, come up from the community level as identified as needing attention or funding or management. Also enhancing visitor experiences, visitor centers, and to manage visitation, to educate visitors on responsible behaviors. And another thing the plans do is they help elevate things to the level where they can attract funding. So if it's identified in a strategy and lots of community partners have built the strategy and point to specific projects that require funding, it's more likely to be funded. So you'll see successful funding come through things like TAX, the Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport, has a destination development fund in the past, and they funded things like new trail signage and information kiosks. You'll see that in Sumas Mountain Region Park, for example. Another example might be in Nelson, closer to my colleagues on the panel, where the TRTDI, the Targeted Regional Tourism Development Initiative, funded 90,000 for an enhancement of existing trails to relieve user pressure and distribute increasing users and creation of an adaptive trail for users requiring mobility assistance. Increased accessibility will make the trails more usable by all ages and abilities. Some of the goals of this funding are things like equipment, materials to create jobs, labor, and signage. That brings me squarely onto accessibility in outdoor recreation. How can we make sure that our opportunities are available to all ages and abilities? Some more examples of funding towards adaptive trails include the Cloudberry Trail project in Prince Rupert received $60,000 from REDIP funding to create a 4.3 kilometer multi-use accessible pathway that connects Prince Rupert Civic Center to existing and future outdoor rec opportunities. In the past year, the Kootenay Adaptive Sport Association received a combined $850,000 from various funders to bring to life a vision for a fully accessible BC Southern Interior Excursion Loop Trail. So you can see there's some examples when communities come together around a plan and there's multiple stakeholders agreeing on where the investments need to be, you can start to see the pockets of money that can be drawn towards these projects. Another theme that comes together when you think about tourism and you think about rec is the stories. Tourism is all about telling stories. And there's lots of great stories to be told around recreation, of course, but also around environmental stewardship. Example, the Kamloops Wildlife Park Society received $87,000 from Pacifican to build an outdoor classroom. It will accommodate visitors of all ages who will have access to a curriculum-focused conservation, biodiversity, and sustainability program. And partnerships, again, in the story realm with Indigenous groups and environmental stewardship and heritage initiatives can be told through the voice of the tourism agency. And it can really foster local pride and care for the environment. The more that we have awareness and beautiful images being invested and locals telling the world about their passion and their places that they love. And also government efforts we align with, when parks need to manage areas, that are heavily overused, and we need to think about how do we do that together? How do we market maybe a different park that has a lower visitation? So we work together into ways to mitigate, the user needs and the park needs. There's often things that we work on together, like providing seasonal closures, partnerships with Indigenous nations. And it's particularly you'll see that in the areas of the Sea to Sky corridor. And then just briefly, the role of the community destination management organizations and the visitor centers. Um, BC is very unique in the visitor center network that we have. Not every province has such a robust network of visitor centers, and I think we can make a better use of them in terms of helping them to tell a story and to teach, to train and help visitors understand the importance of our areas and how they can engage with recreation safely and the wilderness safely, and how we can, behave responsibly when we're recreating. Um, and I believe these assets in the community can also provide value to not only visitors, but also to locals. Finally, one last bit. This is a pilot project that we're working on this year. It's a 2-year project, last year and this year. We're calling it the BC Tourism Climate Resiliency Initiative. We received $3 million from the Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport. And we've created 4 projects helping tourism operators integrate sustainability into their operations. So for example, there's many different scenarios, but there's a option for businesses to have climate adaptation planning for their business. Once they have a plan, they can apply for micro grant funding to support some initiatives. For example, they might want a fleet of their boats to be cleaner, so they might have different engines put into their boats so they're not using the same level of CO2. So there's lots of different ways that people can green their business, look at ways of becoming more resilient towards climate change and effects of wildfire, etc. So this is a really good project to look into. The other project around this is that common metrics. How are we measuring success? What is it beyond heads in beds and visitation? How do we measure how we're becoming greener as a network and as a sector? Finally, for communities, for DMOs and for other economic development officers or those who work towards destination management, we're creating a network to support professional development and bring some of the best practice from global learnings to British Columbia around stewardship and how we can start leading in this space. That's about all I have to share today. I'm looking forward to the other presentations and to the Q&A. I do have my contact information here. I can share it out after this as well. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Erica. I appreciate it. I just curious if could you touch really quickly just that idea of using the visitor info centers because, like you said, they're everywhere. They're in many of our communities. So, how do you see that role kind of expanding of just being there to sort of direct people? What do you see that possibility there that say an outdoor group could work with the visitor center?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the more well-informed your visitor counselors are around being ambassadors of your community and understanding for example, if they're trained in bear aware and they know where to go to find the the, the things required to become more safe in the wilderness, then they'll be able to tell visitors that. They'll be able to share that information. There might be a visitor center information kiosk around bear aware. There might be an opportunity for audio AI experience about training someone in the visitor center how to use bear spray, when to use bear spray. Just an example. But
Yeah.
there's lots more. There's lots more that you can use if you're thinking about, we do have a network and we do have a training program that educates the visitor center management and counselors. So it's an avenue people would like to tap into. Let us know and we can see what we can do from a provincial level, as opposed to just you can work with your community level as well.
So any group could go into that visitor center and say, hey, I represent the local rock climbing group, and I'd love to share some information about it with your ambassadors, and that you could start a conversation on that kind of
Absolutely.
individual level. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. All right, great. Well, let's move along here. Yika, let's have you come up next and tell us a little bit more about what's going on in Fernie.
Thank you, Ryan. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen, and I think I'm sharing the right one. Everybody see that? Do you see that? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. And I'm just going to put that on the screen so that I'm looking in your direction. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here. I'll start with just gratefully acknowledge that we live and work in the Amakas Ktunaxa, the territory of the Ktunaxa Nation here in the Fernie and Elk Valley region. So I was asked to come on to this webinar just to speak on some of the stuff that we've been involved in that ties into this conversation. So we're really excited about being asked to present. So I'm the executive director for Tourism Fernie. Just a quick backgrounder. We've been around since 2007. We are the recipient of the what's called the hotel tax or the MRDT tax. And we've, for many, many years, we're focused on, obviously, as a regular DMO, like everybody else, spending those funds on marketing. And it's only been really in the past, I don't know, few years, 5 years, that DMOs, community DMOs have been evolving into not just marketing, but destination management and development initiatives as well. So that's just a little highlight. Our current budget, and that was our last year's budget, was $1.7 million. Our hotel tax revenues reached $1 million this past year. And we're really excited to be able to leverage those dollars with grant funding and partnerships to do some amazing things within our community. Just to give you a little highlights, obviously COVID played obviously a really impactful role in our tourism economy, like everywhere else. But as you all know, I'm sure all of you have seen, it's been a very clear rebound and then some out of COVID, especially in BC and rural BC, where we see a lot of people wanting to get outdoors and into wide open spaces. And we've seen that here in Fernie as well, as we increasing our tourism visitation. Core experiences, as you can see from the list, I'd say 90% of that is based on outdoor recreation. And so this topic is very important and a big passion of mine, as well, as I enjoy mountain biking and hiking and skiing, like many of you do, as well as other many activities. We learned quite a while ago the importance of our land base to the tourism economy and our role within it. For us, the path to really foster that evolution was to build a tourism master plan, which was launched in 2020, right when COVID hit. When we've adapted the current tourism master plan with today's world, but it's even emphasized even more the importance of our land base and really hearing from the residents and business community as to what's important. And specific to the land, it's about sustainability, it's about being balanced, it's about being better managed and planned, safe and accessible, world-class with improved amenities, affordable, enhanced, and thriving. We also had learned in terms of, who's really responsible for tourism and recreation in a responsible way that meets community and resident goals as well. And it was a good process to really show that it takes all of us to be a part of this process in collaboration. It's not just government, it's not just DMOs, it's not just local nonprofit organization, trail groups, recreation groups. It's all of us working together. And within our tourism master plan process, we identified 4 focus areas, of which sustainable management was one of our focus areas. And really, to be able to do destination management and development takes an army and takes a lot of collaboration and partnerships. And that's what has allowed us to, get to where we are today. A couple of years ago, we worked on really taking a next step on the sustainability side for our tourism and recreation industry, especially on the tourism side. We are very clear in understanding that we rely on the trails, we rely on the river to sustain our tourism economy, but we do not want to destroy that. And we want to keep that for future generations locally and for our visitor economy as well. Through further engagement and partnerships and funding, we created we call it the RDEK for the regional district, but really it's the Elk Valley Sustainable Tourism and Recreation Initiative. And basically, we had gone through a process to identify focus areas within this area, with our engagement with local area residents and businesses, really understanding the land base and where they were seeing pinch points in terms of recreation and tourism and using the users impacting the experiences. And so we'd found, key areas were user etiquette, safety, education, maintenance and resources, who's responsible, infrastructure and amenity needs, that help build the experience, and feeling that sense of pride in really having an enjoyable experience at some of these locations, the importance of data, capacity, and managing impacts, monitoring and enforcement, land use management and conservation. And we all know there's a lot of mechanisms in place already for these things, such as Rec Sites and Trails BC to BC Parks. But what we found in our areas, there's a lot of areas that do not have that mechanism to support management of an area, or not enough support for that level, or not enough capacity, not enough funding, not enough resources. And so through the process, we identified some priority actions, and one of those was creating our AmbassadorWild program, and then identifying specific key locations from all the engagement that needed some extra partnerships, funding, support, and help to build on what was there already to either manage it or improve it. And on the right side, you can see some of those specific locations. It was the Elk River, Silver Springs, which is a really popular cliff jumping lake and hiking area, working with our partners such as Melanie at the Fernie Trails Alliance on projects that, like the Hikos Trail, which is one of the epic alpine hiking trails in the region, and many other areas that are really showing where we can find a role to support our partners and our organizations on the ground, whether it's through funding, expertise, rounding the troops, having discussions, doing studies, sourcing data, taking the next step in what would help for long-term sustainability. And again, collaboration has been key in that. Through the 3-year project that we created initially in 2001, it started with a grant from the province, and Erica highlighted one of those grants, which is a targeted regional tourism development initiative, where we got $300,000 to support amenity upgrades for the Elk River. Once you get one grant, you can leverage it to get more. And I know many of you guys are well versed in that, in terms of finding the funding. And this sustainable project with key outcomes and a plan behind it really helped us to commit and find the sources of funding to do some very specific things. And so in the end, it's $1 million, 4-year project where we are executing a variety of initiatives. So the AmbassadorWild program, again, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of areas that need more support, need more data collection, things that are typically not a priority for some organizations, or Rec Sites and Trails BC, for instance, and Melanie can attest to this, that only have so many resources to be in our area. How can we help on the ground? Obviously tourism plays a very key role in adding to the user base, and we have a responsibility to play a role in working with our partners to manage that user base and educate them. So the AmbassadorWild is a team on the ground, primarily during summer season, from May long weekend to Labor Day weekend, a little bit longer. They're doing multiple things. They are going to key locations to conduct maintenance, to collect data on the users. So they do surveys on who's using it, where they're from, what they're seeing, if they're having issues or challenges, or suggestions, to collecting just observational data that can help with long-term decision making, to working on projects with our key partners such as the Trails Alliance or the Elk River Alliance to do projects on the ground or help with cleanups or help with projects and support them. We have a wildlife camera program with the wildlife scientist Clayton Lamb to really track people and wildlife movement to help us with future decision making with our partners. And really identifying how else we can, continue to support the, visitors with with ethical knowledge about how to use the land and water in a safe way as well. And we were beneficial with one of our grants to be able to purchase an electric truck, and it's really been a helpful tool to get out there. These are some images from our wildlife cameras and our partnerships with organizations. So they go out there talking with fly fishermen, fly fisher folk that are out in the water, just to talk to them about the river and safety, and just getting an idea of where they're from, working with school groups to educate local youth about safety outdoors. Obviously, we have an Adventure Smart program, but they don't have the resources to be in our area very often. So we partner with them to help relay their programs to our audience in a more frequent nature. Like I said, the wildlife camera program, that's the team putting cameras up, to doing actual infrastructure projects on the Elk River and areas. And this is an example of a parking lot grant for parking lot work that we were able to secure and work with our partners on, to working with the Trails Alliance to improve a designated camping area on Heiko's Trail. And we also work with the Trails Alliance to kind of collaborate with the multiple groups that operate for winter trail non-motorized use, to source funding and collaborate on funding for winter grooming as well. And these are just an example of two key river access sites that we've secured funding to do boat launch improvements over the next year as well. So lots of different projects that have come from identifying there's a role for us as a DMO to have the capacity to do that, to leverage our existing funding, to find the partnerships, to build a plan, and really collaborate on what are the priorities and needs, and how can we continue to help support fulfilling those needs and priorities for the sustainability of tourism and recreation. We won an award for the work that the program has done. And it's cool because it's a BC Economic Development Award as well, which shows that connection to outdoor tourism, recreation in the land, and what we're doing on the land to economic development. So there is, as you know, a very strong correlation. Mel, I don't know if you're using this image, but I did find it. So why I work with DMOs, there's tons of opportunity to achieve aligned objectives. We have many of the same objectives from a DMO perspective to a trail group, or, the River Alliance, or, another recreation group. There are a lot of the similar objectives. We have a lot of common values. There's power in working together hand in hand. And we've been showing that and doing that on the ground. Yes, there's a lot of bumps along the road and challenges, but we're really, you gain momentum, and it's really fun and exciting. Partnerships, allow you to access new and more funding. It's obviously working with DMOs. It's important, obviously, like I've said, recreational assets are important to tourism, point blank. Like, we need that to sustain ourselves, and we need to make sure we're sustaining those recreational assets for the long haul. So again, back to the common values. DMOs have a lot of unique expertise to support recreation organization as well, from communications, marketing, relationships with other parts of government and businesses, access to funding, grant writing, research studies. So there's a lot of ways we can collaborate and utilize each other's expertise to really make more impact and results. And it's fun. Right now, it's, there's lots of challenges, but you got to start by just talking. Start by talking. Talk about what your priorities are, your visions are, your needs are, your desires, what drives you as an organization, and be open-minded, open to talk, and you'll start finding small successes to be able to focus on, and they'll just keep growing and growing. So I'm not going to play this because I have no time, but there's a little video on that features the AmbassadorWild program on the AmbassadorWild.com website that I encourage you to watch. It's just a short little 6-second video. Sorry, so I won't play it now. We don't have time, but thank you. I'll leave it to that. There's lots more to say, but I'll leave it at that.
Thanks so much. Just before we go on, can you sort of touch on where this came from? What sort of drove this in the beginning, that you sort of took this look and kind of pulled the community and said, what more can we do? Where did that come from?
Well, it came originally from the process of the Tourism Master Plan, and it came from champions in the community, right? It starts from people on the ground saying, hey, we see an issue, we see an opportunity, it starts with one example and then it just kind of goes from there. But the tourism industry needs to, always be reminded of the importance of where they're making their money from. And sometimes it just takes, so having those conversations with key people and being respectful in those conversations. Sometimes, people are ignorant and not really getting it, and you just have to educate them about that. But that process of terms of like, yeah, we want to ensure the trails are great, the river access is great. And how do we do that? We have to get involved, but we need a plan to get involved. So we build a plan, and to build a plan, you need engagement to feed the plan, and then you build strategies, and from there it just kind of keeps rolling, and then you find specific projects, and then you look for money for those projects, and it just kind of builds and builds. But it stemmed from identifying that we need to have a long range plan for that meets community needs as well, and then work towards completing those objectives. So not to say that you have to have a tourism master plan to be able to do some good work. There's a lot of projects you can just collaborate on a small scale, even a big scale, without a master plan. But the master plan has helped us to achieve bigger grants and bigger support, because we're not just coming off the cuff and asking for something. We're like, we've thought about this, we've asked for people's input, this is what's come out of it. So we're organized, and we have a system that we can, use to execute. And it's just evolved from there, and from that dialogue and engagement and identifying, well, what would be the best ideal solution. And that's where the projects come into play.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, Melanie, let's switch over to you, and you can take us kind of a little closer to the ground there and show us what this might look like.
Sounds good.
There we go.
So hi everyone, my name is Melanie. I'm the Executive Director of the Fernie Trails Alliance. So I'm sort of we've gone from the high level of the destination management and the provincial level to sort of narrowing down into a community. And now I guess I'm representing the people that are doing the work of the boots on the ground. So Fernie Trail Alliance was established in 2008. I've been in my role as a paid executive director for it'll be 2 years, I guess, in the fall. I work very, very closely with Tourism Fernie and our landowners and our stakeholders on projects and initiative to make tourism sustainable in the valley, and using our trails an experience for people that come to town. First of all, I'd like to speak to where we are. Yik already spoke to that we're on the land of the Tnaha and Nakmakis, and we're very grateful to be able to recreate and work on the lands where we're in our homeland where we live. Wanted to go over a little bit of sort of the mission and vision and values of the Fernie Trails Alliance. Our mission is to develop, maintain, and enhance a human-powered trail network in the Fernie area. Our vision is to establish a fun, robust, and diverse world-class trail experience that will endure for generations. So speaking to that sustainability piece. And our values are integrity and accountability, community, collaboration and partnership, and environmental responsibility, and respect and positivity. We represent several member clubs and supporter clubs. The Fernie Mountain Bike Club, which is our events group that run all of our events throughout the summer. The Fernie Trails and Ski Touring Club, Stag Leap, which is our trail running club. We also work closely with the Fernie Nordic Society and Cycling Without Age, which are supporter organizations that use our trails. Within Fernie, we've got quite a large network. We've got over 440 kilometers of trails that we manage, various levels of trails, but they're super fun, and we really enjoy working out on them. And one of the unique pieces, I think, in Fernie is that we have several different landowners. We're not just dealing with one landowner. We actually have 17 different landowners that we have land use agreements with, that we work with on a yearly basis with planning and coming up with strategies on how we can better prepare the trails for major climatic events and things like that. So we work really closely with all of our landowners on projects. And so when I was approached to be one of the panelists on this, Ryan gave a bit of direction on to sort of some of the topics that I should be relaying to the crowd on sort of what we do as a user group and what are the challenges to maintaining trails and infrastructure trail infrastructure and assets with more and more people using them. So I don't know if you noticed in some of Yika's presentation, she was also showing a picture of this famous ammonite in Fernie. And this is a large asset that we have that a landowner is finally allowing us access to build trails to. But in the same breath, we also need to protect it. You can see in this picture, I just pulled it off the internet, that someone, is sitting on this mat. It's one of the oldest fossils in the world, in Canada, sorry. And we want to figure out a way that we can make it, that people can visit it and view it, but also in a sustainable and manageable way. So working really closely with Tourism Fernie on signage for this area and how we're going to protect this valuable asset and a beautiful thing to go visit in Fernie. On the next couple pictures, you can see we were referring to Heiko's Trail. Heiko is one of our high value rec trails in the Fernie area that's managed by Rec Sites and Trails BC and the Fernie Trails Alliance, and just showing like the amount of the extra use that we're getting on the trails, how much more maintenance is required to maintain the assets that are on that trail. So we work closely with Rec Sites and Trails BC and with Yika from Tourism Fernie to make sure that we're managing that asset and that resource in a way that is sustainable for years to come, and so that people can still enjoy it and that we don't have to close it down. One of the other topics that I thought would be interesting is questions that was asked was, how do you balance the service to your local trail users versus tourists? Because in Fernie, obviously we have a lot of tourists that come to Fernie to enjoy the recreation. So as a trail organization, we have created this sort of a trail rating or a trail ranking matrix. We have a group of individuals that are represented across different types of users. So trail runners, hikers, mountain bikers, moms with strollers. We have this varied group that comes together to make decisions on our network, to talk about what projects we're going to take on, what trail infrastructure we need to work on, and grants that we're going to apply for. And so we've kind of created this sort of bucket system of sort of access, cost, user experience. And then based on those, we sort of filter it down, and then we're able to rank our trail network and projects based on user experience versus locals versus tourists, and as well as what projects we're going to take on and how we're going to manage them. So it's a really neat tool, and if anyone's interested in learning about it, I'm happy to share about it later. But we do take the time to think really deeply about our network and our trails and how we're going to plan them, and future conversations about when is enough trails, how many trails do we need, and talking about, as well as educating our users. We work closely with Dr. Clayton Lamb, a wildlife biologist, as well as the AmbassadorWild and Tourism Fernie on the sustainability of our trails and usage, educating users on no dawn, no dusk riding. That's something that we're going to be initiating this summer, just for limiting wildlife conflict. And potentially in the future, we've been visiting the idea and concept of rotational trail closures and things like that. So we're definitely trying to be more forward thinking and being a leader in the field of sustainable tourism and sustainable use on our trail network. One of the other questions that was sort of brought to our attention was sort of, what would regenerative versus sustainable, what does it look like on the ground? What does it look like for an organization that's actually doing the work? Well, we work with landowners to sort of create protected areas around trails. So for example, Big Money is one of our most famous sort of big downhill trails that people come specifically here to ride. So we were able to work with our forestry company, local forestry organization that the land is on, to sort of protect that trail so that they weren't going to do any logging around that area, that they shifted their logging to other places. So that was a lot of discussions and working with our landowners and stakeholders to make that happen. Other things is sort of prioritizing rebuilding trails post forestry work to be able to mitigate some of the climate damage that happens after forestry work happens. There's nothing for the water to stick to. The trees are all gone. So culverting and how you're going to build the trails that it'll withstand the rains and things that will come now that there's no forest around it. So we spend a lot of time planning with that. And then also we work really closely with Rec Sites and Trails BC for our high value recreational site areas, and how do we create a space for people to use it in a sustainable way. And so that the way that you do that is by providing them, here is a space where you eat your food. Here is a space where you have a bear hang for your food for when you're staying overnight. Here's a space for where you're camping. So this is working closely with Tourism Fernie and the sustainability program to create those spaces. So here's some photos and examples, like, lots of people were kind of just randomly sitting and eating and doing things. So providing a place for them to go and sit and eat and enjoy the views, armoring trails and making trails that are that will last time, as a lot of thought goes into those for the trails that will be high impact users, especially the trail going to the Ammonite that will be opening. And then this is an example on hikos that Yiko was speaking to, where we're providing a space. Like, this is where you can camp. You don't get to camp randomly anywhere. This is your location. This is where the bear hang is, the proper signage, educating people on where to go. I work really closely with Tourism Fernie on our signage and the network, to making sure that it educates people, as well as providing them stories from the past of the development of the site. Again, here's an example of some work that we've done with Tourism Fernie and all of our trailhead kiosk signage. They all look similar, so the maps look the same, the icons are the same, so it's easy for people to navigate if you're not a local savvy user, that you're coming here as a visitor. Oh, okay, this sign looks like where I was at the trailhead yesterday, and now I know where I'm going and what I'm doing. So trying to have that very similar, and providing parking lot infrastructure. So Yika had shown a photo. There's a parking area, so that was very random, sort of near River Road Extension, which is an area up Coal Creek in Fernie. And there was lots of people that were just parking their RVs overnight and camping there and just making a mess. And so we reached out to the landowner and said, hey, this is something that we're interested in doing. We'd like to clean this area up, give people access, a safe place to park and clean, have better signage. And the forestry company has agreed to allow us to do that. So last year, Yika was able to find some funding for us, build this parking lot. Now we'll be able to have, beautiful signage and a kiosk and a place for people to access the trails from this area. And one of the most important things that Yika's spoken to already is just working with all the user groups. As much as we're a non-motorized group, we work very closely with a lot of the motorized users in the area, because they're using that same Coal Creek drainage to access to their recreation and do their activities. So it's common signage, as well as creating a overall trails master plan for the valley, not just for non-motorized, but for motorized use. So working together with all the stakeholders is really important, and has really brought our community together by having us all at the table and communicating together. Recently, Erica was speaking to some of the Destination BC funding that we've received. So we just received a large grant from Destination BC to create a 30-kilometer adaptive loop around Coal Creek. So this will allow us to protect the ammonite, putting up better signage, allow accessibility, and protecting a lot of the old mine ruins that are up in that area. So allowing us to create this path is really special for Fernie, and will bring in a different type of tourist that will come there for this type of experience. So we're really lucky in Fernie that we work really closely with our DMO and are really close with our other user groups, and hoping that we can help set an example in the province for how that looks. And I think one of the questions, I think that as the boots on the ground group, is sort of funding. I think how are we going to be able to support sustainable and regenerative tourism in the future is providing fundings for the organizations that are the boots on the ground. So I know Yik and I are working on those types of initiatives for finding funding for this, because that's the only way it's going to happen in the future. Being just a volunteer organization managing that many kilometers of trails is not possible anymore. We have, a paid trail crew, we have paid staff, and so we need that funding to create those experiences for tourists and locals alike in the community, and maintain that they are sustainable and regenerative for years to come. So that's sort of touching on all the things that we do together here, and I hope it's inspired you guys. And yeah, thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thanks, Melanie. That was great. Funding, just before we move on to the full Q&A section there, like, do you charge visitors for trail passes or anything like that in Fernie?
So we have a Trails Pass system where locals buy a Trails Pass, but we also have a day pass or a weekend pass that visitors are able to purchase, and we do sell quite a bit of them. Tourism Fernie helps on their social media and marketing, pushing for that, and a lot of our hotel groups, when they're doing any social media posts, like, hey, the trails are open, come and enjoy them. But if you're going to do that, purchase a Trails Pass. It does help support, but it doesn't provide enough funding to maintain what we're doing. We definitely need to find some more sustainable sources of unrestricted funding that's annual, versus just a Trails Pass.
Gotcha. You like something that's more consistent, that you can count on,
Yeah,
versus whatever the season sort of brings in from that sort of more voluntary system.
exactly.
All right. Okay, well, so yeah, let's just move right into the question and answer session here. We have a few questions on in the Q&A box. So I'll just remind you, if you have a question for the panelists, just pop it in there or in the chat, and we'll try and get to them all. And we had a couple that came in before during the registration. So I'll ask a couple of those maybe, and then we'll go back to the Q&A. So I mean, one of them was kind of on the trail fee, and in Tofino they have the Tribal Allies program where businesses kind of collect a fee that goes to the First Nation in the area and helps them with their guardian programs, maintaining some trail infrastructure as well. Are there any programs out there that you guys know of that where this is working well, or is enough and sustainable enough that it can be a really reliable force, and or ways to sort of encourage that use more to encourage people to sort of donate in these situations?
Maybe I'll speak to that, because we've been talking about that again recently at a board meeting where it is a challenge. And I look at organizations, not to say that they have a lot of money, they need money as well, but the system for like Nordic trail systems and snowmobile systems to me are very boundary oriented because of permits and approvals. And so they really have this, I think, feel this mechanism where they're like, if you want to play on these trails, you have to pay on these trails. And I think the broader trail system of just mountain biking and hiking is so fragmented, and that it doesn't seem like people feel that responsibility to buy their passes regularly and consistently, or like, yeah, you have to be a member. There's not that have to part of it. And I think we have to try and work to change that mentality for people using the trails, because there's thousands of people on our rivers or our trail systems, and we need to really get them to contribute regularly, as and then having them automatically sent a bill every, like our Netflix does, right? They bill us on our credit card $30 a month, and we just pay it because we enjoy that. Well, how's the trails any different to that? So we need to find a way to instill that mentally into the system to really start paying for the work that's happening on the ground by our organizations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, the local trail organization here, UROC, that they have that you can lock yourself into the repetitive billing. So every year they just sort of put you back in there and remind you beforehand, just like the apps that you pay for or whatever, so that those sorts of services. I've also heard from some people that visitors in particular, are more apt to donate to a trail organization if it's sort of like part of buying a ball cap or a t-shirt. You buy the trail organization's t-shirt, and by buying that t-shirt, you're giving $20 to the trail organization. Like someone was telling me that they get way more people doing that than just buying a straight up trail pass. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. You're having that tangible, that tourist, that souvenir and then feeling good about it as well. Erica, there's been some questions about the municipal and regional district tax. And this is a tax, and maybe you can speak to it a little bit more, but that's charged in some resort communities. And there's funding, it sort of creates some funding for some tourism assets, but not always for maintenance and things like that. Is that something you can tell us a little bit more about, and whether that is something that could be used for maintaining trails or outdoor recreation infrastructure?
Sure, I can speak to that. The municipal and regional district tax is up to 3% tax that's applied to the sales of short-term accommodation. So it's not just resort communities, it's any community that has, put this forward. Participating areas, so all across BC on behalf of municipalities, regional districts, and eligible entities. So the authorized purposes of the MRDT revenue for those designated recipients are tourism marketing, programs, and projects. Affordable housing was added as a permissible use of the funds in 2018. So Destination BC's role, we just administrate the program. We're administrators on behalf. The program actually belongs to the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport. So we serve as receiving new applications, renewals, reporting, and providing interested applicants with information. the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport are actually responsible for program policy. And the funds support a variety of initiatives from marketing, obviously marketing, but also planning. You can do some destination development planning with those dollars, visitor services, research projects, industry development like training, and event attraction. Unfortunately, the funds are not permissible for being used for infrastructure or that kind of project. And to be honest, there's not enough money to do big infrastructure projects. When I was in Prince George, we received the MRDT as our funding, one of our funding mechanisms, and it's not really in line with, it's not really enough money to do infrastructure the way that it needs to be done. So I think that's why it's limited to planning projects and marketing and things like that.
All right. And so there's no, it would have to be through many levels of government if we wanted to change this, and there really isn't that large of a pool to be drawn from either.
The application, yeah, what you'd have to do, the prescribed, like the entity who's the designated recipient of the fund would have to get a special permission. They'd have to request additional prescribed use for the funds through the Ministry of Finance, and but it's a long process. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so we've had a question here about land managers and how often land managers are consulted when developing destination strategies. Eric, I don't know, is that something that's done at a provincial level, or would that be something that's happening more on those sort of destination master planning sort of level?
I think most of the plans on the ground happen closer to the ground. We work with partners like parks, like obviously entities like parks and park rec sites and trails. But I think a lot of the land management stuff comes down to the regional districts and the entities that manage that specific area.
Yeah. Yuka, is that something you can speak to?
Yeah, I mean, when we put the tourism master plan process in play, we had obviously a consultant and a task force, and the task force included the Trail Alliance, included the Tanaha, included accommodators, government, like all the key stakeholders. So it's, trying to always have those key, and then you go out and do the general engagement in terms of surveys or meetings, and everybody identifies the key players that need to be a part of the process. And so we had that in process. When we did tourism master plan, we didn't have 15 landowners at the table. I mean, but that's really working through the Fernie Trails Alliance, for instance, as a key partner to help guide the plan from their perspective with their relationships as well. So and so, yeah, whether it's the river or BC Parks or the land base, it's kind of working with the local connections and groups that have that relationship to kind of feed the system in the plan.
Right. Someone here is asking about First Nation involvement as well. I know Tourism Vancouver Island, as part of their sort of regenerative pivot, is doing a lot of storytelling related to First Nations. Have you had much engagement with the Tanaha on First Nations involvement in tourism?
Yeah, so it depends what the project is and the roles from our perspective. I know every different group works with specific different departments, or whether it's lands or business development, and with our master plan process and our work, we've been working more specifically with individuals like Janice Alpine on communications and feedback in the planning process into what we do as well. So, and then when it comes to the infrastructure projects we've been involved in with all our partners, a lot of that is through the communications and then through the permits and approvals processes as well. So we have a contract with the Tanaha through Janice Alpine as well in terms of cultural naming and content for our signage program, for instance.
Okay. And Erica, maybe from more of a provincial overview, I mean, how are you approaching the First Nations aspect of the regenerative tourism sort of perspective?
Yeah, it's similarly, all of the work that we are doing with our Invest in Iconics, for example, and previously with those destination development strategies, is through engagement. And we often have engagement with the First Nations within that particular area that are in particular just with First Nations, hosted by First Nations. And so then those engagements then become part of a larger plan. But I think learnings through the process is that it takes time, and sometimes the engagement is it's when they're ready. It's when they have the capacity, or when the tourism is becoming part of an area that they'd like to go into, and it might not be the moment that you're ready to have that engagement. And so I think making sure that there's always that open door, and that these plans are always work in progress, and we're always open to bringing in stories and signage partners and language partners, cultural interpretation along the way. And there's always opportunities to bring in that Indigenous partner or experience when they're ready, whether it's an entrepreneurial level that they're ready, or community council, like chief of council level. It comes in different pieces sometimes. And our experience has been to have an open door, and to support with what they're hoping to do, to support their needs on. And it might not be all about tourism. It might be that we are a source of a solution to something. Maybe it's a language program that they're really wanting, or some basic infrastructure that they're wanting, and tourism can be used as a mechanism to build that maybe wasn't thought of before. But it doesn't always start with tourism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Melanie, I know you're telling me earlier a little bit about that one of your landowners is the local nation. And so can you tell us just really quickly about how you kind of approach them and work with them?
Yeah, I actually was really lucky at the Responsible Recreation Conference that was hosted last year in Revelstoke. The Ktunaxa were there as a group, and so I went over and just started my role, and so went over and introduced myself and sort of made friends with one of the arc review specialists from the Ktunaxa, and sort of invited him one day, just, hey, do you want to try mountain biking? He'd never tried it, so I brought him to Fernie and took him for a mountain bike ride and just chatted, and so we've been for a few rides since then, and that sort of built on the relationship. And then now we've sort of engaged as well with the Tobacco Plains Indian Band, which is one of the groups under the Ktunaxa. There's 4 groups, and they came and walked the trails with us, and some elders, and so yeah, we're starting to just still building that relationship. We're at the point now where we're hoping to create sort of a memorandum of understanding with them, so that we're able to do trail maintenance and trail work on the land that meets their values and their vision for how the land should be used. So we're working that out right now. And yeah, it's just basically just spend time, like go show up at the Ktunaxa, at the Tobacco Indian Plains Band office. I would go out there and participate in activities. There's a border walk coming up at the end of June. Like, we're going to go and participate. Just keep showing up. I mean, they're so busy, and there's a lot of demand on them right now. But just, yeah, try to connect with someone and put the time in, and it's so rewarding and fun, and I've made a new friend. And so, yeah, it's great.
Nice. All right. Well, it's after 2 o'clock here, so we'll wrap up with one final question. I'll get all 3 of you to sort of weigh in here. Just the idea of like looking ahead 5 or 10 years, and what does the relationship between outdoor recreation and tourism look like? And maybe pick one thing that you think is the most important aspect that we need to sort of address to realize that vision. And Melanie, you're still up there, so why don't you go first?
Sure. I think for me, I think it's continually working with Yika and all of the groups together, and just basically having everybody at the table and sharing what everybody's vision is for what their needs are for all their recreational needs, and bringing those to the table, and working with Tourism Fernie to come up with a master plan for the network and for our valley together. I think that's the most important thing right now, and deciding where we have to put a stop to where we're expanding in, and making access and infrastructure in certain locations where we don't have it. I think those are the things, but just basically bringing all user groups to the table and having everybody together and coming up with a plan is the most important thing.
All right, and Yika, let's have you go second here.
Yeah, 100% agree with Melanie's comments. Is the only way forward is to work together. You can't operate in silos. You have to start talking, and it may take time, but you just take baby steps. Find a way, even if it's one project, to start moving ahead on, instead of biting off something more than you can chew as a group. Every community is very different across the province in terms of capacities, funding, number of people, and resources and groups. So you really have to find your own way to move forward in small ways or big ways. But if you keep persevering and communicating well and working together and just being open and honest with what drives you and what's important, I think you'll get there. You have to just have patience and persevere and work together.
Great. And Eric, I'll give you the final word there.
Yeah, thanks. You mentioned regeneration and regenerative tourism in the beginning, and I don't think as an industry we're there yet. I think if we're really going to work, say 20, 30 years in the future, and with all the demand that's coming, because I know the increased demand is coming for the next 20 years for sure. We have to create mechanisms and be creative about where the dollars flow. So visitors have money, they're willing to spend premium for experiences, but they can't just be left to their own devices. So maybe there's a social enterprise model or something that takes some of that money, gives them an elevated experience that's guided or that's and with an ambassador, or somehow, showing them the way, teaching them with a local in place, and then the dollars can flow back to conservation projects and the experience can be monitored and managed better. Because I think that there are definitely visitors that we're looking at, high yield visitors. We're looking at people in their, they have a lot of money to spend wherever they choose to go. They have nice mountain bikes or they're willing to rent them, but they need access to someone to show them the BC experience. It could be cultural interpretation. It could be transformative experience is what they're looking for. So the more that we can build that in to recreation and think about it from how are they going to pay for this and how is some of that money going to go back to the supply, back to the cultures, back to the environment. That's a system of regeneration that we haven't gotten to yet that I think we need to start working on.
That's a nice vision. All right, I'm just going to wrap up here by sharing my screen one more time. So thank you first to all the panelists for being here and sharing your experiences and knowledge with us. We will be sending out an email with a link to the recording of this webinar along with key takeaways and resources. So don't worry if you couldn't keep up. A reminder that this webinar is part of our monthly series. The best way to find out about June's topic and to stay up to date with the Outdoor Recreation Council is by subscribing to the newsletter at orcbc.ca. And a reminder to please stick around for the survey. It pops up in a moment as soon as I stop speaking. It's a great place to let us know about anything you wish we'd cover today or any topics you'd like to see in the future. So with that, I'll say good afternoon and thanks again for coming to this webinar. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.